We stepped out of the train stop at Paddington Station. From there, Pendleton hailed another cab that would take us directly to the Tower of London. As the horse's hooves clopped and the carriage swayed, I glanced outside. It feels like it's been so long since I was last in London. The streets feel oddly nostalgic. I can hear laughter. School children, perhaps? Speaking of, I wonder if Holmes and Marple are in class at the moment. Or...
My lady, please avoid looking out of the window. You don't know who's out there that can see you.
Oh, right. What was I thinking? I pulled the curtains together to block out the tiny gap from where I'd been peeking. It's interesting she thought of Holmes and Marple. Even if I couldn't see, I could hear Big Ben making itself known. By its chime, noon had just struck. Noon was a joyous hour on normal occasions, lively even, and lavish in its friendly gatherings for tea amongst friends and family. The idea of attending school feels somehow nostalgic. When Jack and I were schoolmates, I was so certain we would grow closer with each new day. I was always looking forward to his letters, however large or small they were. I want to see you again. I want to speak with you again. But I'm afraid. When I finally see your face, what can I say?
What is it, my lady? Having second thoughts? The Tower of London is where the guilty meet retribution, where torture is performed and where our Maker is met. If you're this agitated before we've stepped inside, then it's better if we turn back.
Nonsense. I've made up my mind. I have been wondering, considering, the kind of person Colonel Morin was, how did he manage to escape the noose, and yet Jack is it's inescapable? I mean, I know he's being pegged for the Ripper murders, but just based on what he has actually done, he's still well, I'm gonna get the noose. It's really? You let Colonel Morin stay in the tower for decades? But the sweet boy is hang him. just go and hang him. Oh boy. The world I was about to step into was unknown. I kept quiet for the rest of the ride to reaffirm my strength to Pendleton. But inside, the fear continued to build with an uproar. The cab stopped before the Tower of London. Ravens flew about its tallest points. They appeared every bit the ominous guardians they were foretold to be.
What business have you here?
We should like to visit a friend of mine, Jack Miller's.
Pardon me, then. Right this way.
The burly man gave a polite nod before leading us inside, whereupon he relayed a request to a second warder. From what I could see, I had no doubts as to his reputation of being a nigh impossible place to escape. Its guard was impeccable. I shivered. Within these elderly stone walls, an untold amount of malevolence of sins past lingered. The corrupt had been held, tortured, killed, and the non-corrupt. Pendleton and I stepped further inside.
Jack Miller's position as an exceptionally dangerous criminal has led to us placing him in the White Tower. Miss Whiteley, if I may. The White Tower is full with other such highly dangerous individuals, as well as people guilty of political offenses. I should ask that you stay close to me.
All right. Thank you. The aura of this part of the tower was like the persistent prickling of piano wire, through which we had to weave in the most hesitant, meticulous manner to avoid being cut. It was like nothing I'd felt before. From both sides I was stifled by the groans of inmates. I kept a steady pace, careful to mind my affairs and look in no particular direction, when I was at once rapidly pulled to the side by my hair. Ah!
What happened?
Someone's just pulled my hair!
My lady, please, avoid straying from the center of the hallway.
I composed myself as best I could before complying.
The prisoners here have all gone mad, I'm afraid. Perhaps it's for the best. Mad or sound, execution awaits them.
I did not have the heart to do more than a small nod. And Jack is here as well. How must you feel in this sort of place?
Ah, here we are. This is his cell. Though you are close to him, I feel I must advise you to keep your wits about you. He is, as you can see, a man destined for execution.
It hurt to hear it said aloud. Where we stopped was on the farthest end of the White Tower's uppermost floor. It was a tense walk for me, but nevertheless I stood. This door which I faced had a single, small iron-barred opening. I could see just enough. Jack?
Emily? Is that you?
Jack was crouched on the floor. He looked just as he did when I last met him. A touch more thin, I supposed, and his pale skin was considerably paler than usual. Had he been fed since being imprisoned?
Why? Why are you here?
Jack barreled to the door to come as close as he could. I'm sure it's a surprise, but I found out where you were from the paper.
Oh, that's how. You know what's gonna happen to me then?
I do. Jack's gaze clouded as he turned away from me. I was right here, but this one door, this ridiculous door, made him feel so far away. I would have given anything to remove it. I wanted to feel the same closeness I felt when he came to warn me. Would you kindly open the door? I'd prefer to engage him more closely.
I cannot allow that, ma'am. As he will soon face the death penalty, he cannot be freed. At most, he is permitted to converse with you in this manner.
Is that all, then? Will I never be able to sit with him again? He's here. He's right here! I just want to talk with him so badly. It's so good to see you again, Jack. I hated the way my voice trembled. And Jack, I was certain, felt no better.
I told you to run. Why are you here? Why can't you listen? The true Ripper's not been caught, and we know he will stop at nothing to kill you. Bradley's gone on record to say he will murder 1,500 women in London, and if he's said it, then he will commit. He isn't one to make humor about these things. I'm already bound for hell, just a matter of when. Wanted to take him with me since me ticket's been booked, but I suppose it ain't meant to be.
They arrested you in my home, didn't they? Were you there because you thought I might be in danger?
That's not it. I am a murderer, Emily, and I have quite rightly earned my sentence. What I regret is involving you in this. All I wanted was to take responsibility for that.
Responsibility? Why would you go so far for me?
'Cause you're important to me. You're my friend.
Friend. Friend! The warmth surged to my cheeks when he said the word, which to my sorrow also brought to light the ache in my chest. I regret it if I caused you any pain by coming here. But after reading about you in the morning paper, knowing you were here, I just had to come. I'm so sorry, Jack. You risked your everything to tell me to run. Now when you need someone most, I can't do anything for you. I hadn't intended to cry, but before I could stop myself, the tears rolled down my cheeks, and the shaking of my voice grew.
You don't have a thing to worry about.
He was quiet so as not to disturb me, and yet I felt worse for it. Don't be silly! This isn't right! I understand that you need to atone for your crimes. I do. But you shouldn't need to take the deeds of others with you! The only thing I could do in the moment was cry out. This did him no good, I thought. This didn't change his future, I thought some more. My hurt served to grant me heavier tears and Jack an ever deeper sorrow. Aw, you guys actually got close enough through there? Well, thanks, Guard and Pendleton.
Stop that. Do you have to look at me with that face?
He was even quieter right then. My voice could barely hold itself together, whilst his remained a steady anguish, one which became steady and sweet upon a new question.
Got a small favor to ask you, Emily. Stick out your hand.
What? I don't see why not.
Well then, give it here. Just for a minute.
I did as he asked and found myself taken aback by how white-knuckled it had become as I reached towards the bars. Jack did the same right then. He reached between the bars to take mine and, conscious not to startle me, enveloped my hand in his. This is the saddest first handhold ever. I guess it's technically not the first handhold, because we held his hand at the park, but oh no, here come the tears. Oh, this picture. Oh, that fang that's sticking out of your mouth, Jack. Oh, it's too much for me.
It's all right. So if it's not impolite of me to ask, I'd like it if you didn't clench your fists so tight. You'll hurt your palms with your nails that way.
Jack.
Besides, when I see your fights the way it is now, something in me makes it so I cannot turn a blind eye.
I was lost for words. Jack, who was in circumstances most would never know, whose final moment was to be as simple to do on someone's calendar, who had no reason to think of anyone but himself, thought to comfort me. I wanted to open my heart to him. I was desperate to a point where it started to overtake me. The gaps between the bars were not particularly wide, and though Jack's hands were lean and pointed, he could only reach so far, but he still reached his farthest. All this effort just to calm me, just to hold my hand. It was everything I needed to feel at peace.
Have you calmed down a bit?
Yes, I have. But can I stay like this a little longer?
Of course you can. Your hand's shaking, you know.
Well, I'm afraid. Out of my wits, really. What can I say, Jack? When I first read you had been arrested, I'd grown so upset that I hadn't a clue what to do next. After you said to run away from London, I gathered my things and left the city straight away. But I could never forget you. Even after leaving, I was a woman possessed with worry. I couldn't sleep at night. Every part of me longed to see you again.
Really?
Right now, I want to tell you to run just as you told me, but...
I ain't gonna run. I chose to wait here in peace till the end. I've accepted what will happen to me.
I knew you were going to say that. Never did I think to see a man so close to death look so alive. Jack's eyes, which by all accounts should have dimmed, glittered with a fire far too brilliant to dream of putting out.
Don't give me that sad face. This is how it was always going to be.
But Jack, are you all right with this? Truly all right? You can look at this and see it as a work of fate. It was all too sad, and despite the warmth of his hand to comfort me, I knew I had plenty of crying left in me. Oh, I said her name.
Emily.
He turned away as if he couldn't bear to look.
If it's what you'd like, you win. I'm happy you're here. If I'm honest, I felt ready to cry when I first saw you.
Did you? You don't look it.
Wish I did for you. I'm not used to showing much of how I feel the way you do. Still, thanks to you, I'm better at it than I was before.
Much better, I should say. Why, even I find you easy to read at times.
Still a cheeky gal you are.
Jack showed me a bitter smile. I have an idea I'd like to share with you, Jack. You see, I intend to start collecting donations so that the children of the East End can begin attending school. And I'd like to use some of the wealth my parents left to me to start a small school of my own.
What? What do you mean?
Due to Her Majesty's kindness, I've been blessed with the chance to attend school. I've loved my time there. So while I cannot do much, I'd still like to create the same wonderful opportunity accorded to me to other children who wish to learn. I'll employ educators from the slums, too. Teachers, those with some proficiency who have yet to find a proper use for it, and other such people.
Certainly a charitable thought, but, well, it ain't a cheap one, is it? Think of all that time and money.
I have it sorted. A man named Spencer's agreed to let me use the first floor of his general store for a very fair price. It's quite spacious, enough for 40 students by my estimation, and it'll be more so after tidying its storage. In return, he'd like for us to purchase the children's lunches from him. This way I can allow children who work, children with no homes, any child who has the will to study to enjoy a healthy life with friends.
So you do, then. Still look like your head's in the clouds, but you've given this some proper thought.
I wondered what about that made him seem so fragile in that moment. Now, didn't I say before that the first part wasn't necessary?
Oh, I suppose you did. Sorry.
I just hope the murders come to an end soon so that everyone can give their futures the same proper thought.
I want the sign. I really, really do.
As the conversation naturally moved to silence, Jack looked up at the sky through the barred window above him. The sky now was grim, cloudy, yet he looked as though he were gazing at something beautiful. Even if you tell me not to 1,000 times, I will expose the truth.
Wish you'd give it up already.
Or so he said, but that bitter smile returned.
Miss Whiteley, I'm afraid your time is up.
Very well. Thank you. I turned to the guard just briefly to acknowledge him before bidding Jack farewell. Well, even if I must say goodbye now, I'll come again as soon as I can.
You go through all this bloom and gloomy, and you want to come again. You leave your sanity at the mansion.
He let go of my hand.
Bye, Emily.
Well, I'll see you soon.
I shall accompany you to the entrance.
If only I could snatch that key from the guard's hand and set Jack free. But even if I did, Jack would not leave. The choice was ultimately his, and he had chosen that cell.
Was this enough for you, my lady?
Certainly. There wasn't anything more I could have done. Let's be off, Pendleton. I kept my eyes steady towards the ground. I didn't want Jack, nor anyone else, to see my quiet sobbing. What do I have to do to save you, Jack? Her Majesty's ring has no power in this situation. Is there nothing within my means that would change your fate?
Still hard to believe Jack the Ripper's been caught. A real monster, that one, and I swear I ain't never seen worse. You won't find me complaining when his execution come round in a month. Complain? I'll be celebrating. And I reckon it won't be enough to see him dead. Got to make a real show of his suffering first. I like the sound of that. Let's say we have ourselves a good laugh and throw a few sharp stones before the noose finishes him off.
Cheap ale was the drink of choice throughout a small pub located in the East End. It was during times of depression, of prosperity, or when finances were middling. Its patrons were rarely afforded luxuries. Tonight was a lively time, to be certain. No matter whose table one joined to indulge in conversation, the topic was Jack the Ripper. The exception being, as his age made him quite conspicuous, a lone boy.
I'll have some fried chip potatoes.
Listen here, youngster. A boy like you'd best run home directly at this late hour. Just 'cause they got the Ripper don't mean the streets are safe now, understand? Or does he have an interest in all murder talk? You plan to watch the execution, then?
I certainly do. Bound to be rather humorous.
Humorous, he says. Humorous. So you fancy yourself a big laddie in a big lad's pub for entertainment? Very well, then. Why not pot with a few shillings for a big What? Where'd he go? Ain't seen nobody but you. You so drunk you can't tell a boy from a broom now.
Piss yourselves stupid whilst you can still make merry, idiots. Jack Miller is caught, locked up, and is soon to shake hands with the devil. I rather fancy how well this is going for me. What'll they do after executing the wrong man, I wonder? Jack ain't like me. Saucy Jack ain't the sort to take pleasure in dark affairs, so I shall have to make certain the world is aware instead. What a sight it'll be to see! A London who thinks it's all over, happiness down the streets, never a gayer lark with booze and smiles. Oh! The ecstasy as I then begin to kill so brutally a coroner would fight. It's gonna be the best feeling in the world.
Well, it's good to have dreams, Bradley. Barf. Winter made itself known as a chill burned London's night air. Coal-heated homes comfortably and families gathered, filling the city with an amiable glow. A month passed with no murders to the Ripper's name. It was time someone put this error to right. The place was to be near Spitalfields Market. In a room rented by the night on Miller's Court off Dorset Street, a young prostitute by the name of Mary Kelly was silenced. A man clasped his hand over her mouth from behind. There was no reaction, no intake of breath, no scream, for a deep slice had been impressed upon her throat in the same instant. So clean was this slice that it did not begin to bleed until seconds had passed. And so this bed became her final resting place. Interesting. So... Nope, I got no theories. I got nothing. Alright. Her body was not discovered till next afternoon when the building's landlord knocked upon her door with some irritation. Mary Jane Kelly had been far from the ideal tenant. She had missed 6 weeks in payments, and he simply could not permit a 7th.
Miss Kelly, are you in there? No answer. Perhaps she's still sleeping.
A life of prostitution meant that her hours were subject to the needs of her clients, who, of course, were often keen to meet at night, so it was not at all uncommon for him to find her sleeping past midday.
Oh.
He sighed before moving to a window to peer through. It was cracked, when quarreling with a man, apparently. A curtain from within blocked his view. Reaching daintily through the crack, he moved the curtain and looked within. The landlord withdrew his hand instinctively as he stared in horror. He had met eyes with what remained of her bloodied face. This contortion, if one could still define it as a face without a nose, ears, and other such reckless disfigurements, continued downwards to her neck, which had been cut so severely that her head was solely connected to her torso through cracked vertebrae. Slashes and scrapings of the skin had occupied the head, legs, and arms, whilst body had been subjected to stab wounds, an endless amount post-mortem to accompany a weighted goring of the heart. This woman had been a source of great fun for her last man. Hours before she was whole, speaking, perhaps drunken, perhaps flirtatious, perhaps decorated to be more enticing with a horror's makeup. She looked hideous now. She was no longer a woman, but mere lumps of meat and fat in need of sculpting by a butcher's hand. A table in the room was where her organs remained in a sloppy heap. Ugh. Jack the Ripper, thought the landlord. A shock charged through him. That abominable name! It has to have been him! He needed to alert Scotland Yard immediately. Turning heel without pause, he ran as fast as his legs would carry him away from the scene. Pendleton and I were northwest of London, along the outer ring of a rural village called Chipping-Campden. There, surrounded by farmland, I sat comfortably in a house reading the paper. Jack the Ripper is still at large. Corpse found at Dorset Street, the most mutilated yet, worthy of the devil himself. I think the headline is a bit too emphatic about this. What an awful case this is.
It's not entirely unexpected, however. After all, the public was led to believe the Ripper had been caught, and the previous murder the last.
I suppose the one saving grace to this is people will begin to question if Jack is who they say he is. But this article just talks about how he may not have been acting alone. Why jump to that conclusion?
See it from their perspective, my lady. The Ripper had been arrested, and so before this they only had to wait for his day of execution. It could be they're struggling to make sense of this new development.
Pendleton, do you think the Ripper will kill 1,499 more women? And it does seem there are tens more suspects in addition to Jack now.
I would count Holmes, Watson, and even myself amongst them, given our visits to the East End. At any rate, the threat is enough that I've heard prostitutes fleeing the East End are being driven away elsewhere left and right, presumably by those fearing they will inspire the next murder.
It's just dreadful. Worse, this is likely what the true Rippers planned all along.
Indeed. Sherlock Holmes and the Yard are hard at work. They always are, I must note, as I by no means wish to discredit their efforts. But it may be time to admit we've reached a blockade of sorts.
Oh, I don't think that.
Is that so, my lady?
There remains one very effective way to catch the true Ripper, Pendleton. You know what it is too, I'm sure.
Well...
He did know, and at this turn of conversation his expression hardened. We do have bait. There are over 1,000 victims planned, and of those he has identified one person he wants to kill. Me. Therefore, I will act as a lure so that we may finally catch him. If Jack the Ripper does appear to target me...
My lady, I must object. This is too dangerous. Even if I, the police, and your friends were with you for your protection.
No one has seen Jack the Ripper in person. Even I, whom he targets, don't know his face or name. But Watson knows. He was right there. Watson, where have you gone? What happened to you?
Those who do haven't lived to describe it.
We haven't a clue as to who he'll target next unless we allow him the golden opportunity he needs to murder me. Also, Pendleton, I should like to tell you something. In the event that I lose my life, I've kindly asked Mrs. McLeod, the educational entrepreneur, to take care of all my assets. So should it come to pass, I will need you to arrange the relevant procedures in my stead.
My lady, when did you do that?
Last week. I sent a letter from here and she was pleased to accept.
I understand. This is what led you to prepare your will, then.
Indeed, it was the very will I penned in his hand. But, Pendleton, when did you find that?
I apologize for doing so, but I read it before you went to sleep.
You're terrible! You shouldn't be sifting through my things without my consent.
And yet my actions were not as terrible as the contents of this will, I assure you. I counted over 10 elementary misspellings. Honestly, I've never seen a will less dignified.
Must I always tell you to mind your manners? I tried my hardest, but it's the first will I've ever written.
Though not the first time you've studied basic spelling. This would be a source of great embarrassment to you if learnt by the world, so I shall have to declare it null and void.
That is not for you to decide. I thought quite hard about... Ah! Oh no! With swift movement, he tore the will beyond repair and tossed it in a nearby rubbish bin.
But very well. If you're so determined, then I will not object. May we do what we can to catch the true Ripper. Although I will say that this still may be too much for Holmes, Watson, and the police to handle.
Thank you, Pendleton. Let's make this the last crime he'll ever commit. I clenched my fists. It's been nearly a month since Jack was first arrested. There's only one more day till his execution, and time grows shorter by the hour. Even if I can't change your fate, I wanted some parts of the reality I faced to change. Some could not, and I simply had to put up with it. But some could if I did something, and whatever amount of work that would take, I was willing to do it. I wondered, with death whispering over my shoulder, did this new resolve make me seem more alive than ever the way it did Jack? I did not know until much later how far Pendleton was willing to go to swat away the Reaper. Well, that's ominous.